Hello, friends. It's still cold outside. Not terribly cold. It's above freezing, but I don't feel like doing anything outside on this Saturday. The older I get, the less I tolerate cold. Having spent a lifetime in the infantry, uh, I've had enough of cold when I don't have to. So, anyway, I thought I'd get in the loading room today, and I was going to prepare some 5.56 or 223 for reloading. I haven't decided which one of those cartridges I'm going to load for. There are some differences in those cartridges as far as dimensions inside the case. Not exactly interchangeable. Close, but no cigar. Not going to get into that. There's tons of videos out there on that. Use your search engine up here. Find those. Much smarter guys than me can explain it better than me. But I am going to talk about something that can make your life a little bit easier whenever you're reloading, and that's swaging your primer pockets. When I first started, I wasn't swaging my primer pockets. I was just forcing primers in. Ruined some primers doing that. It's definitely a lot more difficult if you're dealing with cartridge cases that have a crimp in the primer pocket. Now, most of your military brass loaded for military style applications, so your 5.56 cases, more specifically, are going to have crimp primer pockets. Some of your 223 will as well. It depends on the manufacturer and who all that kind of thing. Okay. Now the reason they're crimp is to keep that primer seated in there through rough handling and repeated loadings and unloadings and going over rough terrain and all the things jostling around in there. And it also keeps it nice and tight and helps keep it dry, get that nice tight seal in there so it doesn't get water penetration into the cartridge case. Lots of reasons for crimping and how they crimp and why they crimp. But that crimp, whenever you pop that cartridge, that primer out, it still remains there. So you need to, it loosens it up, but it's still there. Swaging it will really alleviate that and make your life a lot better when you go to load this ammunition for yourself. So let's talk a little bit about that. And again, if you're all looking for a polished video with all these smooth edits, you're on the wrong channel. So bear with me while I low tech redneck here. All right. So, some stuff out of the way. So, whenever you get into these cartridge cases, you're going to have some cases. See if we can get this to focus. I'm hoping we can. Boop, boop. All right, there we go. Wait, what happened there? Boop, boop. I'm not good at this. All right. There we go. All right, so, as you can see on this case, this is got a crimp all the way around it. You see the little ring around there, around the primer pocket. All right, so that's one that's crimped. I'm gonna pull up another one here. See if we can get that to focus quicker. All right, see, this one is uncrimped. It doesn't have a little ring around the primer. It's not wanting to stay in focus, so there we go. Or maybe put my hand behind there. Alright. So it doesn't have that ring around it. So this is an uncrimped factory case. Okay, for a 223 Remington. I think this other one was actually 5.56. I don't remember. See if we can get it to focus on there. But yeah, this was a 5.56 millimeter. So you can see right down there. And you got that crimp all the way around it. Now then, we got this little guy. See if we can get this. Now it is also 223 or 556. Can't really tell this. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting the mutter there. But it is also crimped. But it's just got these 3 crimps. See the little dots dink? They rotate around there. You can really see that one there. But there's 3 on there. You can really see that one. In that. That's another example of how they crimp a primer in there. So we already kind of went over why they crimp, and we're going to head over here to the press real quick and knock some of these cases out and then take a look at them. Alright, so we're heading over to the press. Now I've got my Lee Universal decapping die in there. So, and I don't have my correct shell holder in. So let's correct that real quick. Let me grab my 223 up here, my 223 set. Put my shell holder in. And we're going to take those same 3 cartridges that we had and we're going to decrimp them. Or deprime them, rather. Let's knock those out. They knock out nice and easy. Crimped or uncrimped with this thing. Of course, that's what your presses are made for, to make your life a little bit more easy. Okay, that was the really full crimp one. That was a little bit more difficult than the rest of them. But as you can see now, you can still see that crimp. That's all the way around there, right? On that first one that we showed you. And then we're going to grab another one. That was the uncrimped one, and you can see here it's just a big gaping open hole. It doesn't have that ring around it still. And let's see what these look like. And you can really see evidence of those 3 crimps in this one, right? That were locking that primer in that pocket. Now what we're going to grab out, I'm going to put this back up. Now what I'm going to grab out is my swaging setup here. Alright, so this is RCBS swager. There's some dedicated swaging tools that just mount on your loading platform, whatever you're using, your bench. There's these that work with your tools. I found this to be my best option for how I load and where I load. It's got inside of it, it's got some instructions on how to do this and how to set the die up. I'm not going to get into all that for you. Now I have my Hornady setup has got these Hornady proprietary quick connect deals. I forget what their exact name is. I'll have to look it up. Sorry, Hornady. When I first started loading, I thought that was going to be the way to go for making things quick and easy on me. What I found was it just kind of added to the cost, because you got to buy one of these little deals to put your die in for every die you use, or alternatively you can just get that crimped in there and set in there and screw it in like you do with the regular press. I've kept with it just because I'm hard-headed. If hindsight being 2020, I probably wouldn't have went with this style of loading setup. No, Hornady, it's nothing wrong with it. It just adds more expense. It does load just fine. But anyway, going back to RCBS, So you have a different sets of swagers in there. You have a small primer swager and a large primer swager, and you got the stem to match those. One of them is for a large primer and one of them's for a small primer. And what I've got set up right now is a small primer one, and then you got this little guy over here that goes on to your ram on your press. And we're going to talk about that in a second as I set this up. But like I say, I've already had this die set up. I guess the last thing I swaged was some 5.56 or 223 or something with a small rifle primer or small pistol primer. It does all the above. So this is how this works. Let's go over here and set it up. All right. So you see how these little quick connects move. They just kind of rotate out, and then you can just set that aside. And then rather than sitting there and screwing your thing in, you just, once you get your dies set up, you can just bam bam change them out that quick. The next thing you're going to want to do on this to get your swager set up is to remove your priming arm, and it just pulls out and you set that aside. That's how that works on this Hornady press. And then you replace, you get your whichever set you're using, you know, large or small, and you can kind of look on these and you can see the, yeah, well, shoot, the difference in the size is pretty obvious. One of them's bigger around than the other, right? So we're using the small today because that's what we got. So we put that in the place of the shell holder, and then over that, doesn't matter which one of those things you're using, you only get one of these. You put that over them. Now, so we're going to start off with, let's just start off with this one that is already, that wasn't crimped from the factory. All right. We're going to take him and you just set him on there. All right. On that little tit, and then run it up. And that stem's pretty wide. You gotta get in there and make sure you get on it. I mean, it takes a little guidance into it. With these 223, they're pretty, the neck and that stem are pretty close in diameter. So you got to be a little finicky on that. When you're resizing something like a 30 caliber, it's not that bad. It's boom, boom, boom. These, because that stem is just right at that length. And you just push it all the way down. It'll get a click, and you come off of it. And it gets a little tricky. It gets a little sticky. Come on, guy. Oh, sorry. Putting a lot of pressure on. I should have got this out of my way first. That was my problem. But anyway, sorry. And you can see that it neatens that hole up. You'll be able to see it a lot better in the next step, because I'm going to use one of these that is, you'll see how much it changes this one. All right. So here's your one that is got those. Let's go with the other one here. The three. That's got those 3 crimp pins in there. All right. So same thing. Set him on there now. You know, you can put it on there first if you'd like. That might be the better way. Now, I haven't done this a lot in a long time, obviously. Like I say, I'm just getting back onto my reloading bench after a break of over a year because I just needed cataract surgery and was being recalcitrant about doing it. But now that I can see better, I'm back to the bench. So if I'm fumbling over some stuff, I am definitely out of practice. So, that being said, you can ram it on up in there. and then come on down. And so that one was really easy. But you can see how now those three little deals are gone. You can still see them on the outside of the rim where they pinned in a lot of material in there, but now you got a nice round hole that your primer can go in with a lot more ease. Still have to press one in. You see, I can't press it in with my finger because it's still going to be a tight fit, but you won't be trying to fight that crimp. Now here's the one with the full all the way around military crimp on there. You see that full all the way around it military crimp right in that 5.56. So we'll set him on there. We'll run him up. We'll get him in the get him on that stem. Run it all the way up till she clicks down. We'll run him on down, and this one will glide on off there. Now let's take a look. Now you see how we got almost all the way gone. You can still see that where they moved the material down to make that crimp, but now we have a nice even round primer pocket. Once again, show you how that works. All the way down, all the way up. Pretty tight on there. It'll pop off and your crimp is out. Now then, when you go to load this thing now, you'll be able to get that whenever you go to prime it. You'll be able to get that primer seated in there without having to fight that crimp. It is an extra step, and forgive my fumble fingers, again, being out of practice on this thing. What I like to do when I get a bunch of brass built up, I'll deprime it, and then I'll swage it, and then I'll tumble it after that. That way it's ready for the next step, getting it trimmed, and then we'll go on into continuing on into the reloading process. add some time, but it saves you some heartache, I think. And if you're, just loading range ammunition to go out and plink with, and you're not going to rough handle it, and it's not going to be like ammunition that you're going to try to go load out and go into a gunfight with, then, that's just fine. If you've got your mind on a collapse of the Republic and all that, and you want to start preparing for that, I suggest you buy factory ammo for that. The reloading stuff, yeah, that could be a skill that you definitely need later on into a long conflict, but we're not going to have a long conflict, folks. I don't know if we're going to have a conflict at all. I'm getting too long in the tooth to fight. And I realize that. I'm closer to 60 than I am 50. Just turned 57 years of age. And no, I don't dye my hair. There is gray in there. A lot more in my beard, but there is gray in my hair because it's getting old, and I spent a lifetime in the military. I spent 21 years of my life in the United States Army Infantry. Seen my share of deployments. Been to combat, yes. And that's all we're going to say about that. But if you're wanting, ammunition for a fight, buy it already made. It's going to be really consistent with what you need for a combat load. Get that stuff with a crimp factor, with a crimp on the primer, because you're going to be gunning and running. And of course, we're not even going to talk about the drones. Wow, got way off topic from loading there, didn't I? I'm going to pull it back in. I'm not going to preach about that, whether you're left or right or center. Second Amendment's ours. Loading's fun, and that's part of it. So, sorry I got off topic. Back to the swaging. It will, like I said, add to expense a little bit, buying the tools. It'll reduce your frustrations down the road in the loading process. And it will add a little bit of time to your loading process. But for me, it's therapeutic, getting in there and preparing the brass for the loading process. Just especially those particular stages, the depriming, that's kind of absolutely mindless. You just click, 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 click. And then the swaging gets there too as you get back in a rhythm. I'm obviously way out of rhythm. But anyway, that's why I have a swaging tool, and I do swage all my brass every time. When I'm gonna load it for the first time, whether it's a pistol brass that I picked up on the range, or brass that is not factory brand new, I don't swage those. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna kind of trust them on that. Maybe I should swage it, but all my range brass that I pick up to load, I'm going to swage it, just because I've learned that it saves me some heartache in the next step when I go to prime it. So, all that being said, I hope you found some value in this. Like and subscribe like I'm a real YouTuber, which I'm not. Enjoy the reloading process. Enjoy what life gives you. Take a time out to not take yourself so serious sometimes. Get on the loading bench, clear your mind, load some ammunition safely. Y'all have fun out there.